Hello and welcome to Military Mantra. In this interview, we have today a former Indian Navy pilot, Sid Venkat, who will be discussing with us his whole journey of joining Indian Navy, life within Indian Navy as a pilot, and various life lessons that he has learned over his service. Welcome and thank you for coming on this interview, sir.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on this show. Thank you, Akash.
Yeah, sir, if you could tell us, how did you decide that you wanted to join Forge, and which year did you decide that?
Well, it happened, I think, close to 2011 and 12 when I got in touch with one of my friends who had just cleared the university entry scheme for Air Force, and he came out of the interview, and he's a childhood friend of mine, and he was explaining the interview process, and the very explanation of the process of SSB sounded very interesting. And I went back and did some research on the interview process, and it was, according to some website, the most difficult interview in the world, and it really sounded challenging. And also, right from my childhood, I did have the passion for flying, and my father had been in the NCC during his childhood, and all of these factors combined, and I that's where my inspiration to join the military began. And slowly, as I started reading for my preparation for SSB, I started to discover a hidden passion inside me, and that led to all of what happened later on.
So if you could tell us, you went through university entry scheme. So how was your whole, experience in the selection system before going to SSB? Within the SSB, how did you prepare, and what tips you would like to give to the aspirants who will be watching this interview?
Okay, so back then we did have the university entry scheme. I'm not sure if it still exists. I'm given to understand there are certain changes within the naval selection methodology. Back in 2012, the way that Navy acted was like they used to conduct an off-campus interview, and they invite all the applicants to this university or college where even I went, and we used to have a group discussion. And out of the group discussion, prospective candidates are filtered to a second round, which would be a personal interview by the interviewing officer. I think it was a commander rank officer who took care of all of this, along with a lieutenant and a lieutenant commander. And once all of this filtering happens, and if you go through, you will receive an invitation for an SSB, where again the first stage is quite similar. And as a preparation for all of this, I had been preparing during my last year, in my fourth year of engineering. That was 2012 to 13. And we did have the university entry scheme where it was possible to be recommended during your course of study of engineering. And I did go through this preliminary interview for SSB during my seventh semester. And once I was confident that I'm going through in, I opted for a 2-week course in one of the leading SSB training institutes in Bangalore. And yes, that opened my eyes and gave me a lot of confidence, some information on the nitty-gritties of the SSB. We did have some former SSB officers coming and giving us guest lectures. So this was my preparatory stage, and also during this phase, I got to interact and then work as a group, as practice as a group. In the SSB, I often tell prospective candidates that it is possible to train individually for the group, for the interview and the psychological test, but it's not possible, to train individually for a group task. You need people around you to practice for a group task, and hence I do recommend to aspirants, if it is possible, do explore the opportunity of joining a training course. Maybe a week or 2 weeks would be sufficient, but that would expose you to a lot of nitty-gritties and ideas that you may not be aware of. And then you are put in a situation that is very similar to the group tasks in the actual SSB. And this is what you require. This is kind of a preparation that I would recommend to future candidates. But also not only the group task, but you need to understand yourself. You need to know yourself better than anyone else. And for that, I had a strategy, which is the closest friends of mine. I did ask them about my positives and negatives, and I had listed out my positives and negatives, and I saw if it matched. And to a larger extent, it matched, and to some extent, what they said I had left out. So I kind of incorporated that and got and assimilated everything into something which I understood was my personality roughly. And with this image of my personality, I was able to successfully crack psychological test, which is very important when you start writing the essay about yourself. And then during the situation reaction test and word association test, most importantly, all of these factors contribute. And also to maintain an overall perception of what is happening in the world. I used to read a lot of newspaper, and I used to read bestsellers, books that belong to the bestseller category. And I do not restrict myself to one particular genre. It could be fiction, non-fiction, but as long as it is the best of the category, I'm going to look for the book and read it. And this is going to expand my overall understanding of people. And at some point of time in the interview, this will help me. And I'm sure I'm going to recommend the same to candidates who are aspiring to join the forces.
Okay, got it, sir. So then you would have gone to Indian Naval Academy. So how was your experience within the INA, and any memorable incident you would like to share with the audience? Any?
There are some incidents that only my course mates and I have enjoyed it, and it's difficult for me to bring about the same emotion through storytelling. But I would say that at INA or any other military academy, your limits are stretched. You will understand some of the physical capability that you never thought you had. You will be put through some extremely pressure situations, and your physical and mental extremes would be reached, and the academy helps you realize your own potential. And I personally, nobody probably likes the academy when they are inside the academy, but when you graduate and then you look back to those times when you were struggling inside the academy, all that you have is some wonderful memories.
Mhm.
And it's very difficult to convince people that your life at the academy is going to be enjoyable before joining the academy, but after the academy you sure are going to have a lot of good memories. But the routine is going to be a little tough. Of course, you're joining the military. It's not a university or a college. It is going to be tough. You'll be having subjected to a lot of physical activities. Your sleep time would drastically fall. Your eating habits would have to be disciplined, and then your overall life would have to stick to a timeline.
Okay.
That's how your academy is going to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then the culmination of academy is going to be the camp. There's also going to be a lot of sports activities, chance to showcase your talents in terms of public speaking, in culturals, in dance, drama, and musicals, quiz. And there would be enough opportunities to expose your talents, but also to learn new skills. For example, for me, it was archery. So it's an avenue to explore your physical extremes, your develop your mental capacities, to exhibit your skills, but also to imbibe and learn new skills.
Okay. How did you decide basically that you wanted to become a pilot, and how does that selection process happens within the Navy?
Mhm. Okay, right from my childhood, I wanted to be a pilot. You don't ask me why, but I just wanted to be a pilot. And when I started watching movies and cartoons, the kind of childhood that we had during the 90s, I was fascinated by fighter jets. So in the Indian military, you only have two courses where you can fly and opt for flying a fighter jet. And it was Air Force and Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had applied for both of these courses and I got through Navy.
Okay.
So that was how I chose. But the interview process overall begins after you clear the SSB.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have another two stages, which would be the first round would be the aptitude test, where your perception of 3D imagination would be tested. There would be a written examination, which is standard. I think it's the process still is very similar, followed by a skill test where they would test your locomotory skills, okay, hand-eye coordination, and it's very similar to a video game. There would be a small box, and there would be a ball that would be wobbling, and it would keep changing its direction, and you would have a stick in your hand, which can control this ball, and your task is to keep the ball inside the square or the rectangle
Okay.
for as much time as possible.
I think you're talking about the PABT, which used to happen.
Yes, this is about the
I
PhD.
gave PABT on 2014 when I went for
Uh-huh.
AFSB interview. So I think you're talking about
Okay.
that. Currently, it is not there. Now we have CPSS. But after you joined
Okay.
Navy, did you get an option to join aviation, or through US it was very much clear that this entry completely is for aviation? Was it like that? That's
Yes,
my question.
it's more of the second entry. I mean, my entry was UES pilot entry scheme.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay, so it was pretty defined.
Okay.
Where you would end up.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I was very clear in my mind that I wanted to be a pilot, so I applied through this entry. But then you would be asked later on, once you clear, what are your second priorities?
Mm-hmm.
Like if the vacancies, if the seats or the vacancies for the pilot entry is over, in which branch would you like to continue?
Okay.
And I think I've given the I think I have opted for logistics and engineering and observer category
Mm-hmm.
after becoming a pilot. But lucky enough for me, I got through the merit list, and I think I was fairly in top of the merit list, and I ended up being a pilot. But there were also other candidates, particularly from the Coast Guard. We used to train together, and the Coast Guard pilot entry was a little different. You have to be a pilot for you to be qualified as the pilot entry candidate.
Okay.
The Navy is different. They take you as a candidate and then they train you as a pilot, and then they observe you in the units. But for Coast Guard, you need to be a pilot, and only then you can apply for the PSP.
Okay, got it. Uh, so how was your, first experience in a plane? So which plane basically did you board?
Okay, this was with the Air Force. All
Okay.
naval aviation cadre would have to train with the Air Force for their first, basic orientation. And I did go. Some of us, close to 15, 16 of us, would had gone together to train with the Air Force at the Air Force Academy in Dundigal. And the first day, I clearly remember my instructor was taking the aircraft to the runway, beginning of it, and then he asked me to, open the throttle, push it to full extent,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel the G force. It was pushing me back on my seat, and as soon as it touched a particular speed, he took off, and that was a thrilling experience. I think I would never forget that experience at all. Wonderful flight. The aircraft was a PC-7 Mark II of
Okay.
Swiss origin, and we were luckily the first or second batch to have flown this particular aircraft. They Prior to our course, there was a different aircraft which was aging, and they had phased it out. And for the first level of basic training, we had the new PT-7 Mark IIs, and we were the first or the second batch, depending on the aircraft, to have flown it.
Okay, got it. So if you could tell us, how does one day as a naval aviator looks like, in terms of
Hmm.
routine responsibility, any
Okay.
ideal day?
For an Air Force cadet, this would be different. For a naval officer who goes there as a trainee,
Uh-huh.
this would be a little more different and a little more liberal for us, in
Okay.
the sense that we don't have to undergo the usual academy training.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the academic, we would have, in the Navy would have categorized it into two different boxes. We would undergo our basic military orientation at the Naval Academy. We become officers on passing out, and then we reach the Air Force Academy as officers.
Okay.
So our life is not the same as an Air Force cadet, but we would be somewhere between, in terms of hierarchy, we would be clearly above the cadets. We would be officers, but in terms of skills that we have, we would still be trainees for the QO5. It's something very delicate for the QO5s to handle.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot, they need to train both the naval officers and the Air Force cadets, but the way they have to train and motivate them would be completely different.
Okay.
But as the routine for us would be much similar to what a cadet in Air Force Academy undergoes. We would have to wake up very early in the morning to prepare for the briefing and attend the briefing probably before sunrise. And once the briefing is, if it's your turn to brief the audience, then
Mm-hmm.
you need to do some preparation prior to that. You need to reach the briefing room, and then you have some routine to carry out. You have to flash a presentation, explain people, and then a random guy from the audience will be picked up to simulate an emergency, right? And then that begins your day. And once this briefing gets over, you would have sorties planned for the day, and one of your sorties would fall between the first 2 hours of the day. You
Okay.
would prepare for the flight before the sortie, and then take off with your instructor. You would have clear objectives of what you would be doing on that day in that particular sortie. You need to train, so you have a list of objectives to meet. You should be clear about it. You go, you fly your sortie, you come back, and then you go back and look at the videos, and you would followed by a debrief session by your instructor.
Mm-hmm.
So he tells you what your objectives were, whether you were able to meet it or not, and how convincingly were you able to meet it. And then you would be given reviews, which on which you would have to start working on. And then you go back. Probably by this time you have your lunch, and
Okay.
after lunch you will have ground based subjects. They will give you explanations on basic aerodynamics, aerostructures. You learn about the aircraft. There would be followed by two and a half to 3 hours of classes.
Mm-hmm.
So you would be broken off by close to 5:30 or 6, and then you reach your place. It's almost time for dinner. If you can squeeze out a little time for your physical activity, it's good. And you do that, you have your dinner, come back quickly, you prepare for your ground subjects and prepare for the next day's sortie, which in
Mm-hmm.
itself would take you close to 2 to 3 hours. So
Okay.
close to 11 to 11:30, you can pipe down, you can go back to sleep. But this is how a typical day looks like. Very intensive. You would have to manage your time very carefully. A lot of activities planned in a day, and absolutely no time for no other activity.
Okay. So I know you train on a fixed wing plane, but you were a helicopter pilot within the Navy. So
Yes.
what
Mhm.
difference, is it flying a fixed wing and a helicopter? Any challenges or any differences that you feel?
Yes, after qualifying the first round, Navy gives an opportunity to choose between the three branches of aviation, which is the fixed wing, rotary wing, and in the fixed wing you can opt to choose fighters, maritime reconnaissance, or helicopters. Okay,
Okay.
out of these three options, you have to prioritize which one you want first. Obviously, everyone is trained to become a fighter pilot, but unfortunately, the Navy does not have the vacancy to grant everyone what they want. So, Navy prefers, in my experience, to grant the fixed wing fighter vacancies to permanent commissioned officers because they stay in the Navy for a long time. So it makes sense to train them for 4 to 5 years and then retain them. And then the Navy, if a short service officer is trained, he would have probably 5 to 6 years left, versus a permanent commission officer who would have more than 15 years left. So it makes sense to grant fighters to permanent commission officers, and then most probably short service commission officers would get, the maritime reconnaissance aircraft or the helicopter. And even I got helicopter. Well, the difference between flying a fixed wing and a helicopter is that the fixed wing is designed to fly, helicopters or not. It's intensively, it's insane. It's not at all stable. It's the pilot's job to keep it stable.
Mm.
It's difficult to get a hang of it, but once you get a hang of it, it becomes easier to fly. But it takes its time to get a hang of flying a helicopter.
Even my dad CEO, so he was an helicopter pilot. So
Uh-huh.
it's very difficult to get your helicopter hover at a point at the
Yes,
same stationary point.
it's that's the point when you realize you have successfully negotiated the basic handling of the aircraft. It's when you successfully are able to hover above a certain point with your helicopter stable. That's when you realize that you have a little hang of the helicopter, what it does. Because hovering at a single point is the most difficult task that a pilot can do for the helicopter with the helicopter. From outside, it looks like the helicopter is staying there,
Mhm.
motionless, and people tend to think that pilot is not doing anything. Probably he's just staying there, so he's dancing and with his hands and legs. But in fact, that's when the pilot's skills are most used.
Uh-huh.
So you need to be aware of the wind, aware of where the helicopter is. You have a reference point. You have to keep the helicopter right above the point that you wish to keep it. And there are multiple forces that are acting to push the aircraft from where you want to keep it.
Got it.
So you need to be have almost have a superhuman ability to sense all of these factors and still be able to control the helicopter and keep it at the place that you desire it to be. It's a big challenge.
Got it. Got it, sir. Sir, I told you that I got a few questions from the audience as well. So I will just ask you one question because the rest of
Mhm.
it I've asked you. So can officers from aviation opt for special
Mhm.
forces? So in terms of Indian Navy, it's Marcos. Can they uh, basically volunteer for it if you're from
I think
aviation?
so. Yes. I think so. I clearly remember some meeting a pilot who was from the Marco, who had both the Marco badge and the pilot badge.
Okay.
So it is possible there, some for special missions. We have seen them in the movies,
Mm-hmm.
which is sometimes similar to what happens in real time.
Mm-hmm.
You need a pilot to carry these commandos to their location, and then more often than not, these pilots are also commandos.
Okay. Got it. Got it,
So
sir.
yes, it is
Uh,
possible.
so we'll come to the books that you read and you would like to recommend to the young audience who will be watching this.
Hmm. So I've never read an SSB preparatory book that you see in the market. That I don't do, but in general, I love reading books. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, what I prefer to have right from my childhood, what I was doing was reading the best sellers in each category.
Uh-huh.
For example, it could be during my childhood, it was the Harry Potter series, the
Mm-hmm.
fiction category, and then and growing up, I also started reading other books, the non-fiction. And nowadays, I go into the bookstore or I go into Amazon and see which are the best-selling books. And I don't choose the category, but rather let the category be flashed on my screen and choose the best book in this category. So I have some basic knowledge in many verticals,
Uh-huh.
and that would help you, answer, look very brilliant during your interviewing officer's session.
Okay.
So it always, in my interview, I was asked question about the geopolitical tensions in Sri Lanka because
Okay.
I come from Tamil Nadu. They thought that I would have some opinion, and then all goes back to the books that I read during my childhood, the newspaper articles that I read. So instead of knowing how to, focusing completely on how to crack the SSP, I would suggest the candidates to know more about themselves, and that is, look with inside to know more about yourself, but also look at the world at a broader perspective, and read a lot many books, not belonging to any particular category, but as much as possible.
Got it.
So these two would help.
Yeah. So you have served in a Navy, my next question would be if you could highlight 3 life lessons that you have learned from the service, which you still cherish. Any
Mhm.
3 life lessons?
3 life lessons. Okay. First one is discipline. You
Mhm.
need to be very disciplined about whatever you do, and this discipline, the quality of it. I knew people need to be disciplined to achieve their goals, but how you do it, I learned it in the academy. You need to stick to your goals, the disciplined way of doing it, no matter what is the difficulty. And secondly, be confident whatever the situation. You have friends to depend on, you have family to fall back on.
Mhm.
So as long as you're alive, you've not lost anything.
Okay.
So you need to be very confident despite the various circumstances that you could be in.
Got it.
And the third one is to be independent. The Navy teaches you to be in a team, but also it teaches you to depend on yourself and then be independent. Okay, so no matter the situation, if you have people around you to help you out, it's okay. But there are some times where you need to be completely independent and solve problems on your own. And you need to have this, confidence that you are able to handle any problem that is thrown at you, no matter what the difficulty, on your own. So this is what I would list out these 3 things as the life lessons that I've learned in the Indian Navy.
Okay, got it, sir. So a lot of defense aspirants will be watching this. So what will be your message to all those aspirants? Because not everybody will clear SSB in first attempt. Somebody has to go for the second and
Yeah.
third. So what will be your message to those guys who really want to join the armed forces?
Well, I cleared my SSB in my second attempt.
Okay.
I thought I would clear it in my first attempt, but I did it in my second attempt. No matter, doesn't matter. But have a strict timeline. I hear about people who are not giving up at all, giving attempts even 10th or 11th time or 12th time, close to 25 years of old age. So my suggestion is that focus on the armed forces, probably for the first 2 or 3 years. Beyond which, if you're not able to clear it, then I think it's for the good that you can choose a different field and focus on that. But within the 2 or 3 year time period that you have set, you know, put in all your energies, emotion, and then prepare like your life depends on it.
Okay.
Read as much as possible, get involved in physical activities, get to know more about the process, but also at the same time, have the confidence you will be able to clear it. Be knowledgeable, get to know about the process of the interview. Talk to as many people as possible. Watch videos, watch interviews, read newspapers. You may not be able to clear it in the first attempt. Not many of them will be able to do it in a batch of 500 people roughly. 4 or 5 of them would get recommended.
Mhm.
But there is always a second attempt. There are plenty of officers that I know who have cleared it in the second or third or the subsequent attempts. The number of people who clear it in the first attempt are very less. Maybe on that week in which you were not able to exhibit your skills was not that particular day which decides your future was not your day, maybe. So give yourself another chance, come back for another interview, and then eventually everything would turn up good. And then if you have prepared enough, it would not matter whether it is your day or not, you would clear the interview.
Got it. Thanks a lot, sir, for your time. And there's one more thing before I end the interview. You can tell us, after you left Indian Navy, you went all across the India. If any
Mhm.
experience that you would like to share, even you told us about the batch you're wearing.
Okay, so after I left Navy, I was traveling to again reorient myself to the corporate world and to decide what I should be, what my life priorities are at that moment in time. And I was suggested by someone whom I met during this traveling to explore the industry of drones because it was up and coming. And he suggested that I could use both my flying skills but also my managerial and leadership skills that I had learned in the Navy. So it was an opportunity to explore both of the skills that I've accumulated. And I joined one of the leading companies in India where I took care of the sales responsibility in the northern northeastern part of country, catering to the needs of paramilitary, police force, and the forest department.
Okay.
So I used to go to the remotest parts of the country where the paramilitary units are located. I used to stay overnights in exotic national forests in the country, and in one such national forest, which was Dibru Saikova National Park in the northeastern Assam region.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It was an island, river island, where I stayed overnight to spot poachers with the help of our drones. And when we were flying our drones, to our horror, we did not spot poachers, but we spot angry elephants, which were annoyed by the sound of the drone, and they were fast approaching. So we had to run towards our safe house, which was luckily, uh, close to 3 meters high. And we climbed the stairs and we went inside and threw the drone and controller, you know stayed overnight. And luckily the elephant chose to forgive us. They went away in the other direction. And staying there overnight was a different experience. We had to forage the vegetables that were lying around in the forest. They were wild versions of potatoes that you would never see in the market in the cities. Wild vegetables, you get to taste them in their own backyard. It has its own unique taste. It was a one night experience, but it was an unforgivable experience. All kind of emotions. You are suddenly into heaven with the beautiful taste of with the beautiful new taste that your tongue has realized. But also you were afraid for your life when the elephants were chasing you.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful experience, in this time. But also I got to see, working in the Navy, you don't get to interact with the Army and the Air Force as much as you desire. uh, so there is a gap between understanding our sister forces. But when I was working for the idea for the drone company, I got the opportunity to meet the border security forces and other army units.
Mm-hmm.
And I was probably one of the very few people in my friend circle who has seen the ceremony of the closing of the gates
Okay.
in both the borders, in Vaha border and also in Agartala in Tripura.
Mm.
So that was one other memorable experience.
Right, sir.
And now I'm one thing led to another. I chose to pursue my higher studies, and now I'm here in the Europe.
Yeah.
Again, working in the field of drones, I would stick to aviation whatsoever. And now I'm working in the field of drone-based cargo delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Drone-based cargos for medicine deliveries, for food delivery. And yes, in sometimes in the future, I would be working in the field of drone-based taxis,
Mm. Nice.
which would ironically eliminate the need of a pilot.
Got it. Really nice. So it was really nice talking to you, and I hope people will be watching it now and even on the YouTube will really understand, how life or journey of a pilot looks like, even within Navy and even outside. So thanks a lot again, sir, for coming on this interview. Jain, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jai Hind, and thank you for having me on your channel. I wish you all the best.
Yeah.
You are doing a wonderful job educating all the aspirants, and I hope that many aspirants, through your channel, through your help, through your good work, would achieve their dreams.